Salutations everyone, welcome to another Overwatch 2 video where today I'm going to be talking, of course, about the latest patch after we've given it a few weeks to breathe now. Not just an initial first impressions, which are fine, but we want more than that to judge such a big patch such as this, because we want to see what's strong, what continues to be strong, and how the player base reacts to the strength of compositions or strategies or characters, and how those strategies, characters, what have you, hold up to the reaction to them being perceived as strong. Maybe they're not as strong as you initially thought they were for the first week or week and a half. Some things take a long time to simmer. Like, you couldn't judge that Pharah rework after just a week or two, because people had to relearn how to play Pharah because the whole flight mechanic was totally different. People had to then learn how to react to the new Pharah and see how good she was there. And then after a while, they then did decide to nerf Pharah with her high win rate where it was across a lot of levels. And that's I think an okay approach to make, to let things simmer. But there are certain philosophies that the dev team has revealed that they balance the game off of, and certain patterns that I've noticed that are a little bit disheartening to, I think, the overall health of the game, as well as the current state of where it's at. So, of course, we're going to be talking about where the current patch lies with the strength of our tanks, as well as the last few updates that we've gotten and what we can learn from them. First off, this patch was a big patch, and they took a big swing. Like they mentioned in their last update, they are taking big swings and will continue to take big swings in the future with their patches, right? And we saw that with the big health pool and projectile size patch. That was a big swing. This change to all the tanks to make them all tankier, and a bunch of other things to give them more power. That was a big swing. And of course, you know, in the future, there's going to be some sort of 6v6 playlist that they'll test out. And that'll be a big swing, because like almost every single character will then have to be adjusted to that type of play style again. Even though we've been developing the entire game for 5v5. And so, like, I don't know how they're going to deal with, you know, map structures and the way certain characters have been created with that philosophy in mind. Like Malga, for instance, how you reconcile that with along with another tank. Well, that will remain to be seen. That'll be its own completely different subject and video. But it's another big swing that they will be taking along with this one. And with this one, I thought, well, you know, with the HP projectile size change, that was a big change. And we only got to hear about a couple of those changes outside of the context of all the other changes. That made it sound really weird. Oh my gosh, why are they doing this? This is a bit worrisome. But then within context with all the other changes, wasn't so bad, right? And then we got to see the patch for the current patch that we're in and all the tank changes. And man, it's really annoying when a game like Overwatch has something that everybody can tell on paper is not going to work. It is not it, Chief. And we don't even need to play test it, because we've seen some of these things before, and that's always super frustrating when the dev team or the audience seems to have short-term memory loss. I've been playing this game since it's been playable for the general public. Since the open beta of Overwatch 1, I've been playing this game. So I've seen every meta, I've seen every iteration of characters be strong or weak, and certain reworks and things like that. We already knew what strong Zarya looks like. That was the launch of Overwatch 2. Zarya was the best tank in the game. And it sucked. It wasn't fun. And then after I don't know, what was it, 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it was after launch, they nerfed her. And it's like, okay, all right, we can wipe our hands of that. We already know what super buff Zarya looks like, so let's not do that again. And they just did that again. Granted, not as bad, because every tank got, well, quote unquote buffed. Every tank got tankier, and some got Also changes to cooldowns and powers and things of that nature, like Zarya, for instance. But comparatively, she got a bigger buff than some. Also with Reinhardt, so he is, of course, super, super strong once again. And some people like that. It's a very popular thing to say that the game is at its best when Reinhardt is the best tank. But, guys, I've played a lot of Overwatch. I've played a lot of tank. I've played a lot of Reinhardt. I did my time in Reinhardt jail in Overwatch 1. He's my, I think he was my third most played character in all of Overwatch 1, and he was my only character in the entire roster I had a negative win rate for. So I don't like Reinhardt because I had to play him, and he wasn't fun, and it wasn't great. It wasn't great, but everybody wanted him on the team, and everybody knew how to play with him. So and nobody wanted to play him. Right? Everybody wanted him on the team, but nobody wanted to actually be him. So I couldn't be off tank. I had to be main tank, and I couldn't be Sigma or Orisa. I mean, I got to be, them some of the time, but for the most part, it had to be Reinhardt, especially before Orisa and Sigma and other DLC tanks came out, when there was less choice. And when you put a lot of power into one role, whether it's 2 tanks or 1 tank, but when you put more power into that tank role, the tank diff is worse. When you have the player who will only play Wrecking Ball, and it's not a great map for Wrecking Ball, or you don't have a team comp that works well with Wrecking Ball, or the enemy team is just very well equipped to deal with a Wrecking Ball, and they're not switching off, that's going to suck a lot more when the other tank is tankier than ever before. And this doesn't change when it goes to 6v6, by the way, but we'll get to that later. I mean, because you got main tanks and off tanks. So, yeah, some people are really happy that Reinhardt's super duper strong. Some people, I'm sure, are really happy that Zarya is super duper strong. And I want all the tanks to be playable. And regardless of what a lot of people thought, Reinhardt was already playable. His win rate was actually pretty darn good. And that seemed to matter to a lot of people, which brings me to my next point. The developers mentioned in one of their recent updates, or the Q&A they did a few weeks ago, something that was not super surprising but very disappointing, where they admitted that they balanced the game based off of people's feelings, even if the data doesn't back it up. So when people complain about a certain character being too strong or a certain character being too weak, even though the data doesn't back it up, the devs say they will make a change. And it's like, okay, I get it, because you want the player base to be happy, and even if it's a vocal minority, they're still vocal, so it seems like there's more of them than there are. If you buff or nerf said character that the vocal minority is vocal about, then they'll be happy. And it makes the perception as a whole that the entire audience is happy because the very vocal people are happy. People have had this complaint with like YouTubers in various games for a long time. It's like, oh, you only listen to what the content creators say. You only, balance the game based off of what they're saying. People have said that, and I don't necessarily know if that's true, but this time the devs came out and said that they listen to the community and they will make changes to the game even if their data shows that they don't need to. Say a character has like a 50% win rate, right? Which is like kind of the goal for every character. It's the goal for every map on attack and defense, for there to be parity and have things even, where everything's not overpowered, nothing's overtuned, everything's playable, and things are consistent and not frustrating. That's what we want, right? But if that character has a 50% win rate and everyone's saying this character's way too weak, you need to buff them, they'll buff them even though they know they don't need to. And that is disappointing to hear. That is frustrating. We've all had our suspicions about how the dev team, how their philosophy is, but we most of the time are never told directly about what goes into their decision making for things. Sometimes they'll say like, this character had a 58% win rate and we needed to nerf it. I think that was addressed in like Pharah's nerfs, was her win rate being super high. And, sometimes we'll get straightforward things like that, or they'll just be anecdotal things like, we've heard your frustrations with this interaction or this cooldown, so we've nerfed it, right? Ana, prime example of this, right? Ana was bottom 2 in win rate for the first year and a half of Overwatch, but she kept getting nerfed over and over and over again. Her sleep dart just got nerfed again in this patch. It got nerfed again, even though I'm sure the data does not show it's a problem, because she's always towards the bottom in win rate. She might have a high pick rate, but if people keep beating a character that's showing up a lot, I don't know why they're complaining. If everyone picked a character that was not very good at winning, I wouldn't be complaining about those characters going up against me per se. I've never had an issue with playing against Ana's as a whole. Maybe sometimes once or twice I've had a game on tank where, man, I just got slept a lot because I was not playing very well and they were playing very well. I can deal with that. That's not an issue that happens a lot for me, and I can deal with those repercussions. But most people kind of can't. So a character that's historically weak, like Ana, keeps getting nerfed. And you'll have characters that are doing just fine, like Reaper or Reinhardt and Genji, where everyone's like, these characters need buffs. And so there's been talk about, reworks to Reaper, even though even in the previous patch, Reaper was doing pretty well. Not a high pick rate, but I am in the camp of it's okay for there to be niche characters in this game. It's okay that Symmetra isn't super great on every single map. I haven't heard those complaints in other video games like Valorant or, League or Apex where, this character or this team combo isn't great on every single map, so therefore they need to get buffed. I don't hear that in other games, but obviously I paid more attention to Overwatch, so maybe that makes sense. But I also do play other games, and I follow people that play other games, and I hear what their community is saying. And again, Overwatch is the community that I'm in, and they do get some unjust hate when it comes to like the pricing of cosmetics. You hear about that a lot. It's like, guys, do you play other games? Have you heard about what the prices are like in Apex Legends? Nobody's complaining about those, but outside of like the whole boycott because they increased the price of the battle pass recently. But those cosmetics are insane compared to Overwatch. Overwatch is pretty on par with their cosmetic prices with other AAA titles. And also, not every video game is the same. Not every team is 10 billion people like Fortnite's is, and some things are harder to make for games because of graphical limitations or third person versus first person and things like that. So not everything is a one-to-one, and some games and companies make sacrifices in order to be competitive. And I'm not saying Overwatch is perfect. There are some. I wish their battle pass paid for itself, for instance, like some other games do. But, a lot of times it does get some unjust hate towards its way when within context with other games, it just doesn't make sense to complain about some of the things within the game that we do play. And when it comes to character balance and the team going off of what the public feels instead of what their data shows, I think it's a bad look, and it's not going to be overall healthy for the game. If they're going based off of pure anecdotes, you're not going to get the full story. You're only going to get those anecdotes, and they already have the full story because they have those internal numbers of what certain characters are doing overall or on certain maps or when combined with this tank or this support or this DPS or what have you. And so I don't like that philosophy that's they feel like that's something that they need to do to balance the game in order to reconcile people's anecdotes instead of what's on the whole, because it's what's on the whole that ends up showing up when the recipe's finished, right? If you get people complaining that Genji's too weak, even though currently right now he has the highest win percentage in Grandmasters and the highest pick rate. So you can't say, oh, it's a low pick rate, but everyone who does pick him is really good. No, he's the most picked and the most won with, and in the tier that he historically does the worst in, right? Usually there's like a drop-off in Genji's when he is good, quote-unquote. He's usually not as good in GM, where people are more coordinated and things like that, and he can't take advantage of, you know, wiping out backlines or things like that. But there'll still be people on this video that'll be like, what are you talking about? Genji's not overpowered. He needs buffs. Even though the numbers show that he's not. People have been saying that with Reaper. People have been saying that with Reinhardt and other characters in the past, and that's not going to change. But the fact that the dev teams has admitted that they're going to be balancing off of these vocal minorities, I think is bad, because when the recipe comes out into the game, it'll play out like the stats, because stats don't lie. The facts don't care about your feelings, people. I'm sorry. But when you start giving more value to people's feelings than facts, you're going to run into some trouble, whether it be real life or a video game. When it comes to the balance of the game, obviously video games don't really, matter a whole lot in, reality and globaling the world right now. But that's not what this channel or video is about. I'm going to pretend that video games matter and talk about them like they matter, because that's what I want to do. And clearly people that click on this video have interest in that as well. So that's a bit disheartening. The big swings that they're changing and that they're going for, a lot of people like when there's big changes, because they feel like it's more fun and more balanced, because people haven't adjusted to what's good and then start playing what's good. Like, again, I'll bring it up. GOATS is the best meta in all of Overwatch, but it took the best players in the world like 4 fucking years to figure that out. And that didn't change the fact that GOATS was best for the first year, the second year, the third year. It was always the best. People just didn't play it yet. But eventually it came out. It doesn't change history. That's the way things always were. But once people figure things out, then things start becoming quote unquote less fun, right? People will always go to nostalgia and say, oh, things were better at the beginning of a video game, or things were better in 6v6 because of nostalgia, things really far away. People nowadays are saying, oh, those old Fantastic Four movies, those were goated. Nobody said that even a year ago, but now that there's going to be another Fantastic Four, everyone's saying, oh, the old ones that nobody liked were perfect. Yeah, sure, guy. No, that's just, you didn't like them back then, and neither did anybody else. I mean, granted, yeah, it made a sequel and enough money, I guess, to justify a second one, but hey, some really bad movies get sequels and then not a third movie. Sometimes even a third and then not a fourth. Hello, Spider-Man. But it's just the nostalgia factor, and people always like a game best when it first comes out, because nobody knows what's good and everything's good and playable. But once people figure things out, then things become bad, so people want a lot of big changes in order to get back that sort of feeling. And that's, I guess, theoretically fine, but that's only going to be a fleeting thing. It's only going to be a fleeting thing, because then people will figure it out. And right now, this tank meta is not great. It's not fun. It doesn't have parity. There's not a lot of variety in what's good, and things were better before. You don't have to take really big swings to a game that's not super far away from being amazing. The game was really good, and they keep making really, really big changes when they don't need to, and the stats back a few of those things up. So you can think what you think, and I hope you really love this patch, but I don't. I think they burnt the turkey. It was in the oven too long, and they overcooked this thing. They cooked too long, and it sounds like that's their strategy going forward, and I'm not looking forward to more of this.